Hare Krishna everyone. On behalf of Hare Krishna Vaman Kshetra, we would like to welcome everyone for Friday evening discourse. Today we are very fortunate that His Grace Devakinandan Das Prabhuji joining us from Singapore. Today Prabhuji is speaking on living in separation from Guru. So I would like to welcome Prabhuji and request him to start today's discourse. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Anand Prabhu. Thank you, Viraj Prabhu. And thank you to all the devotees for joining us today from Vaman Kshetra and from whichever parts of the world that you're in. The beauty of online now is we are truly international, and it's a lot easier for us to get connected somehow. The whole idea of our existence is to have some remembrance of Krishna. We may have so many difficulties and challenges. Sometimes, these difficulties become great obstacles in our path to remember Krishna. But if somehow or another these facilities help us, then really Krishna is kind. What looks like a very precarious situation around the world has given an opportunity for devotees to come together, hear about Krishna, encourage each other somehow or another to remember Krishna. Today's topic is a very it's considered a topic of gravity in devotional service. It's entitled Living in Separation from the Spiritual Master or the Guru. All of us and most of us will at some point or another surrender ourselves at the lotus feet of a spiritual master. We may surrender formally in the form of a Diksha, Guru relationship. Sometimes we may surrender from a form of Siksha, where we take instructions from devotees. Either way, the necessity of a spiritual master is absolutely essential in devotional service. So today, let us spend some time remembering some of the important points and principles of how we can live even while being separated from the spiritual master. What does it mean? What does the spiritual master mean? What does separation mean? And how should we continue living? In what mood should we be if our spiritual master is no longer physically present with us? Just a few days ago, we had such devastating news of the departure of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. And I'm sure that in Australia, Maharaj was regularly visiting there. He would have inspired so many devotees. He would have initiated so many disciples. And no one I know personally who came in touch with Maharaj ever felt uninspired. No one ever felt uninspired. Everyone felt very inspired in his association. And the one common denominator that all devotees speak about when they remember Bhakti Charu Maharaj is his loving dealings, his sense of bringing all different types of devotees together. He was amazingly at ease with the most aristocratic of persons in society. He was equally at ease with simple workers who were just trying to eke out a living for themselves in any part of the world. He could mix with anyone, and everyone loved him. So even in Singapore, so many of his disciples and even devotees who had the chance to spend time with him, they're all actually missing his association very much. And everyone is feeling separation from him. Some of us, myself included, have had the experience of our spiritual master, in my case, His Holiness Srila Mahavishnu Goswami Gurudev, departing from this material world. And for those of us who have had our spiritual masters departing, disciples of His Holiness Krishna Goswami Maharaj, many of them, many senior ones I'm sure, are in Australia, will also share with you what a challenging road it is for a devotee and a disciple when the spiritual master departs from this world. So I pray at the lotus feet of our spiritual masters and His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so that we will not say anything wrong or offensive in the course of this discussion, and that we would always speak and be aligned with Shastra. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. This beautiful prayer that we pray is actually giving us the definition of the word Guru. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 15th chapter, I think it's the 16th verse, 6, 15, 16, in the purport, Prabhupada quotes this particular verse, and he says very nicely that this verse gives us the definition of Guru. Everyone is in the darkness of ignorance. Therefore, everyone needs to be enlightened. So Prabhupada states that we all need enlightenment, but enlightenment can only be there with transcendental knowledge. Therefore, one who enlightens his disciple and saves him from rotting in the darkness of ignorance in this material world, Prabhupada writes in the purport, he is a true Guru. So the definition of a Guru is very important. And now we understand that Guru is one who enlightens a disciple with transcendental knowledge. And that enlightenment of the disciple saves that disciple from rotting in this material world in the darkness of ignorance. Such a person is actually known as the spiritual master. The other word that's very important in our discussion today is the word separation. In this material world, material separation is very often final. If we have our mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, when we are separated by death, it is final. It is final. Some people give you a romanticized idea that again we will meet somewhere, and again we'll meet for 7 lives, 8 lives. My Guru Maharaj used to say, if you have met your husband or wife in this life, I think next life you'll kindly say, let me defer now. 7 lives, 8 lives. Maharaj used to laugh and say, it's not possible. So the nature of material separation, Shastras tell us, is that it is final. Why? Because the nature of the world is that everything deteriorates and everything must end. So because of the temporary nature of this world, material separation is very final. But spiritual separation is never final. Spiritual separation is never final because Shastras tell us that the Lord is eternal. And if the Lord is eternal, then we are part and parcel of him actually. Our true nature is that we are spirit souls, jivatmas. Therefore, the connection between us and Krishna is eternal because Krishna is eternal and by nature we are also eternal. And not only are we always connected together, but the fact of the matter is the moment we are born and we get this sharir, Krishna is so kind that he comes into our hearts as super soul, Paramatma. And there he seats himself there. So even if we think that we are separated from Krishna because of the darkness of ignorance, factually speaking, we're not. Because Krishna is in our heart all the time. Even now as we speak, each one of you, Krishna is listening. He's listening to your thoughts. He's listening to what I'm saying. He's listening to everyone. Everyone. So how can we say then that there is even a question of separation? So separation from the Lord is not the finality of material separation. Because we are carrying Krishna in our heart. And he's always in our heart. Not only is Krishna in our heart, but love of God is also in our heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Chaitanya Charitamrita is very nicely stated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Krishna Prem, this love of God, is Nitya Siddha. It is eternally with the living entity. One does not need to separately obtain love of Godhead. That package is already nicely packaged with the full facilities, and it is packed very neatly in our hearts. It is packed very neatly in our consciousness. All we have to do is Shranavade Suddhe Chitta. Shranavade Suddhe Chitta. We just have to awaken the consciousness of the love of God here by hearing and by chanting. So actually, hearing and chanting about Krishna will always keep us united with Krishna, even if simultaneously we appear separated from Krishna. That is why in our movement, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stated this beautiful philosophy of Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. It means simultaneously one and different. In other words, a devotee can be always with Krishna, but he can also feel separation from Krishna. You realize how different it is from this material world? Another symptom of material separation, Shastras tell us, is that material separation always causes forgetfulness in our hearts. When you are materially separated with someone, for a while you may miss them. But after a while, we have this saying, out of sight, out of mind. You learn to just live with the fact that each other is just separate. It's life. Some people say, oh, I can't live without him, I can't live without him. But they won't die. Somehow they continue. We all have that capacity to do so. Why? Because in material world, there is what we call forgetfulness, and there is what we call indifference. So there may be anxiety and pain, but even in the separation of the material world, the anxiety and pain is not uplifting. But in the spiritual world, it is completely opposite. Completely opposite. Atithiyad bhavan ahanikananam chute yugayate tvamma pashyatam kutila kuntalam shrimukham chate jada udikshatam pakshma kridrisham. The gopis sing this beautiful song in their song of separation. The whole of the 10th canto, 31st chapter is describing the gopis' feelings of separation. But in the separation, they are not feeling worldly and material separation, where it is tragic and it is painful and it makes us not remember Krishna, but actually forget Krishna. In the spiritual world, when someone very dear like Krishna is separated from us, when we relish the chanting of the holy names, when we relish this process of devotional service, and we feel that we are not qualified, and we feel an ache in our heart that we want to come closer and closer and take more and more association of Krishna, that feeling of separation is actually relishable. Why? Because it makes us keep remembering and remembering and remembering Krishna. So the gopis may appear to be separated from Krishna. After Ras Leela, he disappeared, so to speak. But they started singing their songs of separation. But in their separation came intense remembrance of Krishna. And that's why they sing, Aditiyad Bhavan Ahani Kananam. They say that Krishna, in the morning, we see you for a little while. And then you go to the forest with the cows and the calves and the gopas. And when you're away, it is like a millennium. It's like a millennium. And when you come back, you look so beautiful because the dust is in your hair. And, you're not so prim and proper. Krishna is so beautiful. Even when he's dusty and dirty, he looks beautiful. When he's clean, he also looks beautiful. We never look like that. We have to look very neat. If we don't look neat, nobody wants to look at us. But Krishna is Krishna. So the gopis say when Krishna comes back, they see him only for a while because then he's whisked away by Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mata, where he has to be clean and he has his evening things to do. And then they curse the creator Brahma, the material creator. And they say, Brahma has given us these eyelids. And the problem with the eyelids is when you blink, like I'm blinking now, right? That moment when you blink for the gopis, the separation from Krishna is too intense because they can't physically see him. And that is like Trute Yugayate. Now I blink, don't know how many times in a day. I have never felt, oh, I'm missing Krishna. It doesn't even cross my mind. So you can see the vast difference between material consciousness separation and the spiritual consciousness of separation. So never be mistaken, Prabhus and Matajis. Let us remember at the premise of our discussion today that spiritual separation can bring joy because of intense remembrance and because it purifies our consciousness. This joy is not a material joy. This is the joy of spiritual bliss. It is a connection which is eternal. Who is the person who exhibited this in Srimad Bhagavatam? He exhibited it as Arjuna. Arjuna's spiritual master, Chaitya Guru and spiritual master present before him was Krishna, right? Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita in the capacity not as a friend. The friendship ended in the second chapter. The moment he surrendered, the friendship transformed into spiritual master and disciple. So actually, Krishna was actually the spiritual master of Arjuna. And in the first canto, 15th chapter, we come to understand that actually Krishna had departed from Hastinapur to Dwarka after the Mahabharata war ended. And after it ended, many, many months passed. And then Arjuna decided, I'm missing Krishna too much. Let me go to Dwarka and see him. So he went to see Krishna in Dwarka. But meantime, many months passed and he did not come back. And when he didn't come back, Yudhishthira Maharaj became very upset because he saw all terrible omens, that signal the end of the Yadu dynasty and possibly the disappearance of Krishna. After many months, while Yudhishthira Maharaj was so worried, Arjuna came back to Hastinapur. But when he came back, his face was downcast. He was crestfallen. And then Yudhishthira Maharaj asked him so many questions. Why are you dejected? And finally, Arjuna told him of Krishna's leaving from this world. And when Arjuna spoke so much about Krishna, that whole 15th chapter of the first canto is just intense remembrance from Arjuna to remember Krishna. That's what he was doing. And so the starting point for all of us as aspiring disciples and disciples of our spiritual master is that our life should be centered around remembrance of our spiritual master. Remembrance of his instructions. Remembrance of what he told us, what he did, what he spoke. Because the spiritual master is Sthita Prajna. He's Sthita Prajna. He's fixed in Krishna consciousness. So by seeing how he talks, how he walks, what he says, how he handles the situation, we actually become very strongly connected to him. And this is how Arjuna was remembering all the movements of Krishna. In the whole 15th chapter, the whole basis of the remembrance of Arjuna as disciple to the spiritual master is on the basis of one quality: gratitude. Gratitude. The entire prayers, he's just thinking of when I was on the battlefield, my life should have been shortened, but Krishna was there always to save me from all the weapons of the great generals. On the battlefield, all the other people's lifespans and duration of life was shortened by the Lord, but the Lord protected me. So like this, he remembers Krishna on the basis of gratitude. And that is how we must also live, Prabhus and Matajis. When the spiritual master is here, our constant remembrance about him is on the basis of our gratitude to him, because he has opened our eyes which were in the darkness of ignorance. And when we are in separation from the spiritual master, then our gratitude must increase. Every day we must remember our spiritual master with gratitude. And when Arjuna remembered the spiritual master with gratitude, something changed in his heart. In 1:15:27, this process of how to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead as spiritual master, and how to remember our spiritual master, and the effect when you remember the spiritual master, even though you're in separation, but if you remember him in gratitude, is given from 1:15:27 onwards. So these are very important verses for us to remember. So Arjuna then quietens down, and then he starts thinking, and he speaks to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Desha kalartha yuktani hrittapopashamani cha haranti smaratas chittam govinda abhihitani me. The translation is very nice. He says, O King Yudhishthira Maharaj, now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because these instructions are impregnated with the instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and place. So first we must remember one very important thing. Whether our spiritual master is present physically or he's present now in the form of his instructions, we must always be attracted to his instructions. Very often, we are attracted to the body, the features, the talking, the characteristics. But more than that is that we should be attracted to those instructions. That is Arjuna's message to us. He says, now, what is keeping me connected to Krishna? It is his instructions that were given to me. And these instructions, they relieve my burning heart at all times, in all places. So this is what will happen when we become separated from Guru. When our Guru Maharaj departs from this material world, he has not left us because he has left us with instructions. And if we are attached to his instructions, then they will relieve our heart, which is burning in pain. Then he goes on to explain. This is where Suta Goswami now says, Suta Uvacha Evam Chintayato Jishno Krishna Pada Saroruram Sauhardena Tigadena Santashid Vimalamatihi. And the translation is very nice. Suta Goswami said, Arjuna became deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord. So this is what we must do at all times. Whenever we have time in between, become absorbed in thinking of the instructions of your spiritual master. And these instructions, they were always imparted in the great intimacy of friendship. And when Arjuna started thinking of Krishna's instructions for him, even though Krishna had left this world, Arjuna's mind became pacified. Very important. It became pacified and it became free from all material contamination. This is the guarantee of Bhagavatam. Even if our spiritual master may have left us, even if we feel separated from him, we should live in such a way that we constantly remember and absorb ourselves in his instructions. Then our mind becomes pacified. Then our mind becomes free of material contaminations. And then we become relieved of that burning pain of separation. Then in the 29th verse, Suta Goswami says, Vasudevangri anudhyana paribrimhitaram hasa bhaktya nirmati shashesha kashaya dishano arjuna. And the translation is also very nice. The constant remembrance that Arjuna had at the lotus feet of Krishna rapidly increased his devotion. Notice the word rapidly, very important. Paribrimhita means expanded. Now in Sanskrit, paribrimhita means expanded. So when we remember and are focused on the instructions of our spiritual master, what did our spiritual master tell us? Write it down. Prabhus, Matajis, write down the instructions. Write them down clearly. Meditate on them. All of us should do that exercise and constantly remember them. Every time the mind is disturbed, go back to the instructions. Your mind will become free of material contamination. And this constant remembrance of the instructions will rapidly increase our devotional service. Sometimes the question is asked, isn't it, Prabhu, I've been iskcon for 25 years. How to increase bhakti? The answer is in 1:15:29. Constant remembrance of the lotus feet of the Lord and the spiritual master will rapidly increase your devotion. And as a result, all the trash, very nice word Prabhupada uses the word trash. In other words, whatever dirt that is in the heart, whatever dirt that is in the thoughts, they will subside. They will subside. So this is a very important point. Whenever we feel discouraged, whenever we feel how we should be connected to the spiritual master, it is right there in Bhagavatam. It is the perfect example of a perfect disciple, Arjuna, who remembered Krishna. And when did he remember Krishna, Prabhus and Matajis? He remembered Krishna after Krishna disappeared. And that is the same point we are now talking about. Living in separation with our spiritual master. How do we live? And these verses tell us very importantly. The whole point of spiritual life is actually to somehow or another remember Krishna. The more we try to remember Krishna, the more Krishna becomes pleased. And Krishna will then introduce us to the real understanding of who Guru is. Which now brings us to the second part of our discussion. So the first part is very clear. in the first part, remember we spoke about Om Ajnana Timirandasya. We gave you an introduction, about what is the real meaning of Guru. And it is very nicely given to us. Then we spoke about what separation means. We should always be able to distinguish between material separation in this world, how it is governed by forgetfulness, and how it is temporary. And therefore that pain, it makes us moros instead of uplifting us. But the pain of separation from a dearmost spiritual master, though it is the most painful thing in the world, it doesn't mean that our devotional service is going to go down. No. The beauty of spiritual separation is that we are always eternal. Therefore, the spiritual master and his instructions will always be eternal for all time and all places. So this is the part that we must understand. And the key to bridging this separation is constant remembrance of Krishna. The gopis did that in their song of separation. And because they remembered Krishna so much, what happened after their remembrance? Krishna came back. Remember? He came back and he gave them darshan. So what does that tell us? That if we constantly remember the spiritual master through the medium of instructions, through his pastimes, through what he did as Sthita Prajna, how he said this, what he said about that, how he reacted to something, how did he walk, how did he talk, then we learn from the spiritual master. We don't imitate the spiritual master, but we learn from the spiritual master. So this is a very important point we should remember. Now we come to 2 or 3 major points about spiritual master that we must remember. When we want to understand what it means to be separated from spiritual master and how to understand the greatness of spiritual master, when you have time, you should look at the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 28th chapter. The 28th chapter is a very important chapter where Prabhupada writes extensively on the relationship between spiritual master and disciple. It's a very important thing. And particularly before 428, the definition of Guru is given very nicely in Bhagavatam in 4:21-28. This is a very nice point actually given. And there it is nicely stated, that actually the word Guru refers to one who gives proper direction under the authority of the Vedic injunctions. This is very important. Guru means one who gives proper directions under the authority of Vedic injunctions and according to the examples of great personalities. This is a very important point for us to remember. Prabhupada also says in the teachings of Lord Kapila, the word Guru means heavy. It's a nice point. Prabhupada says Guru means heavy. Not heavy in the sense of weight, but heavy in the sense of gravity. Gravity. Heavy with knowledge, Prabhupada says. And what is that knowledge? Again, it is transcendental knowledge. So Prabhupada makes it very clear on this point. Then, in the purport of 4:28-52 of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a very nice instruction given actually. And there it is really nicely stated. Prabhupada says that the Paramatma is actually a form of spiritual master. Paramatma is known as Chaitya Guru. He is the spiritual master within all of us. So even before we came to Krishna consciousness, we already had a Chaitya Guru. And who is that? It's Krishna himself. And Prabhupada writes, he is the spiritual master internally. And when a devotee is sincere and wants to increase his devotional service, then that same Paramatma will then come outside externally to introduce himself as the spiritual master. Do you see the importance of a spiritual master? So Prabhupada says the Lord can reside within the heart, but he can also come out before a person and give him instructions. This is a very nice point. So the duty of a devotee is to actually accept a bona fide spiritual master and consult with him within the heart and follow his instructions. It's very nice. So actually, whenever we want to be connected to a spiritual master, we must always remember the spiritual master is just an external manifestation of Paramatma. Let us never think that the spiritual master is just an ordinary personality. No, he's not. He's absolutely not. And This is something we should never forget. And now that we have understood that, we must also understand that the spiritual master is so unique that there is a very deep understanding and connection between Krishna and the spiritual master. It is nicely stated, in the pages of, I think it is in first canto, first chapter, 15th verse, 1:15 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada writes a very important statement about the spiritual master. He says, to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. So if we say, I want to take shelter of Krishna, what it actually means, practically speaking, is you please first take shelter of the pure devotee of Krishna. We are not qualified to approach Krishna, who is Jagat Pavitra, but the pure devotee is there to act as a transparent via medium. Prabhupada says transparent via medium is like a clear glass, Now I can see all of you because I'm wearing these glasses. If I take it out, I can't see anyone. Sometimes it's good, when you give class and you can't see anyone, it's helpful. But also it's not good because you really cannot see. I'm as blind as a bat. But the important thing is, look at the glasses. Are they opaque? No. Are they translucent? No. They're clear. They're transparent. So this is the medium. My eyes without this medium cannot see. But with this medium, it is transparent. So it gives you what is true. But it also allows the darkness of ignorance of my eyes to see more clearly. You see? That is the meaning of transparent via medium. How nicely Prabhupada has given it to us. He has made it very, very clear that actually the spiritual master is as good as Paramatma. And our only business is to serve the pure devotees of the Lord, because they are the representatives of Krishna. And anyone who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee by accepting that devotee as spiritual master, Prabhupada writes in the purport of 1:15 emphatically, can at once be purified. At once be purified. This is how important it is. And Prabhupada then tells us something deeper. In the 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj, actually it's Narada Muni and Yudhishthira Maharaj speaking, 7:15-27 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada writes very nicely, there is only one difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master. What is it? The spiritual master is known as Sevaka Bhagavan. In other words, he is known as Sevita, Servitor, Personality of Godhead. Krishna is known as Sevya Bhagavan. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is supposed to be worshipped. So the spiritual master is the worshipper of God, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the worshipable God. And Prabhupada says, this is the difference between the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now we know, Prabhus and Matajis, how powerful is the spiritual master. This is a very important point we should understand. The next point we must understand now is, if we know that the spiritual master's level is so high and that he's so dear to Krishna, and just like Arjuna remembered his spiritual master and rapidly increased his devotion even though they were separated, then how should we cement our relationship with Krishna? This is a very important point. How should we cement our relationship with Krishna? Now, this is an important point. Why? Because this is where, practically speaking, we learn to introspect on whether we are performing these things. Are we performing certain actions? Are we thinking in a certain way that we can actually connect with our spiritual master? Sometimes Prabhupada used to say that we should be very careful about taking the shelter of a spiritual master. Prabhupada said sometimes it becomes fashion. Because someone, I have this, I have that, I have a pet dog. Oh, by the way, I also have a spiritual master. That is how sometimes it becomes a fad. If you ask somebody, they will say, oh, I must turn to my guru. But when you ask about the guru, you realize the guru is someone who is breaking every regulative principle. and yet they are seeing him as Guru, or him or her as Guru. But in our parampara, the spiritual master is actually Sevaka Bhagwan. He's a pure devotee. And whatever he preaches is what he acts. And that is why when we lose our spiritual masters, the pain of the loss is unbearable. It is unbearable. So what is the starting point on how you and I can improve and deepen our relationship with our spiritual master, especially when they are no longer here? The first important thing Prabhupada gives us is found in the purport of 162 of Srimad Bhagavatam. In 162, Prabhupada writes very nicely, the desire to inquire from the spiritual master. Prabhu, that verse is 7:15:27. I think someone asked it in the chat. It's 7:15:27, Sadashiv Prabhu. So now I was talking about 162 now. In 162, now we come to the essence of how to improve and how to live in separation from spiritual master. The first qualification we must hold on to very tightly is our constant desire to inquire from our spiritual master. Someone may ask, but Prabhu, spiritual master is no longer present in front of us. How to inquire? He may not be physically present, but he's present in his instructions. And therefore, as we inquire in our hearts, as we sit before the photo of our spiritual master, as we chant our rounds, as we read Bhagavatam, as we inquire deeper and deeper, we should always have conversations with our spiritual master. It doesn't matter if the spiritual master's body is present or it is not. The spiritual master is eternal. And just like Krishna is eternal and can hear us, the spiritual master can also hear us. So never lose the desire to inquire from Guru, whether in separation or whether he's present. And that is why for those of you whose spiritual masters are present, don't lose this opportunity. Hanker after the association of your spiritual master by hearing the lectures, serving him by serving his instructions, and making all your queries, because that is the essential factor to progress in bhakti. So that is the first and very important point. I asked my Guru Maharaj, if you are not here, then with what mood should I continue to get guidance from you? How should I continue getting guidance from you? And Maharaj made me read this portion of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya is a beautiful summary of Chaitanya Charitamrita. But there's a portion in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Maharaj told me that when Sanatana Goswami met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he spoke to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is how you should always cultivate your love, your humility, and this is how you should cultivate approaching the spiritual master. So I remember Maharaj told me to read that portion, and I want to share that with you. When Sanatana Goswami came before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was a very elevated personality in the material world, and he was already very knowledgeable even as a spiritual aspirant. But you know how he approached his spiritual master? He fell at his feet with a straw, and he said, "Dear Mahaprabhu, I am born of a lower family. My association has always been abominable. I'm fallen, I'm wretched, I'm the most wretched of mankind. I was suffering in this dark well of material enjoyment, and I never knew the actual goal of life. In fact, even now, Mahaprabhu, I don't even know what is beneficial for me. Although I am known in the world as a great learned man, but I am actually a fool because I think I am learned." Now he says, "You, my Lord, have kindly accepted me as your disciple and servant, and you have delivered me from the entanglement of material life. Now please kindly tell me, what is my duty? Who am I? Why are the threefold material miseries giving me trouble? And tell me how I can be relieved from this material entanglement. Let me know everything, my dear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that I need to know." And Maharaj told me you should reflect on this, because this is the bridge, this is the platform on which you should always approach the spiritual master. And Prabhupada ends that part so nicely by saying, this is the process of accepting a spiritual master. Prabhupada states it there. This is the process of accepting a spiritual master. One should approach a spiritual master, humbly submit to him, and then inquire from him about one's spiritual progress. So nice. And then I asked my spiritual master, what happens if I'm trying to assimilate and follow your instructions, but I'm falling short? And what happens when you're not here and I'm falling short? What do I do? And Maharaj pointed me out to Bhagavatam 3:6-36. This is where Maitreya is actually speaking. And Maitreya says in 3:6-36, in spite of my inability, he's speaking to Vidura, in spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from my spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am just describing it now in glorification of the Lord, because otherwise my power of speaking would become unchaste. So this is something we must hold on very tightly to when our spiritual master is no longer present here. We should never twist the words of our spiritual master. Sometimes the human tendency is, selective hearing, isn't it? Children, we are very famous for that with our parents, isn't it? I can see Prabhu is shaking his head there. What we want to hear from parents, we will hear. And then after we say, no, I never heard that part of it. And in the same way, very often, when we are with the spiritual master, when he's present here, we are a little bit afraid. We won't try it. But the tendency for the cheating propensity in the living entity is very strong. And when the spiritual master leaves, we can very quickly embellish, add, subtract, multiply, divide. We can downplay certain things. We can upplay certain things depending on what we want. And then Maharaj said, at the end of the day, Devaki, I won't know whether you are the spiritual master or I am the spiritual master. That is the danger. That is the danger. So Maitreya is very nice here. Maitreya is telling Vidura, all that I've told you, I'm actually not very good. I have many inabilities. But whatever I've been able to hear from my spiritual master, I am trying to state it. And on top of that, whatever that I've heard, I've tried to assimilate it. So living in separation from the spiritual master will not be painful if we first hear his instructions and then we assimilate them. If we assimilate them, it means we practice it. We try to put it into practice every day. We make those instructions our life. If we don't do that, then when we speak, when we are speaking, the audience will know that we are cheating. This is what Maharaj told me. The audience will know that we are cheating. But if the audience is inspired, then as Maitreya says, because my power of speech is chaste to the instructions of my spiritual master, they will become potent. So Prabhupada writes in the purport very nicely. He says here that it is not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master. It is not possible. But Prabhupada says, one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. So the first qualification on how we should cement our relationship even in separation is submissive inquiry. You remember? The second is the mood of humility of Sanatana Goswami. Third is the fact that even though we are unable to do justice to our spiritual master, because we cannot imitate him, we must assimilate what we have learned. And as Prabhupada says, by our own honest endeavor, we should try our best. The spiritual master is so kind, Prabhus and Matajis, that he is very much like the Lord. Bhavagrahi Janardana is Krishna. And the spiritual master is like that. Prabhupada writes in one purport that the spiritual master and the Lord are noblemen. They're very noble. And the essence of a noble person is that he can extract nectar even from poison. Even from poison. So this is how we should cement our relationship with Krishna. And that is a very important point. The last and most important because it's leading to this point now that we must actually be very careful about, is given very nicely in this principle of strictly following the instructions of the spiritual master. And Prabhupada describes this when he talks about Raghunath Das Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Raghunath Das Goswami came from an extra rich family, but he renounced everything just to follow the orders and instructions for the pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And whatever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered, he strictly followed it. If you read Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya Leela, 6th chapter, in verse 312 or 313, Prabhupada writes very nicely, the principle of rigidly, the principle of very rigidly, Prabhupada doesn't say rigidly, the principle of very rigidly carrying out the order of the spiritual master must be observed. The spiritual master gives different orders to different people, Prabhupada writes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Jiva Goswami, for example, Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, he ordered them to preach. You remember? But he ordered Raghunath Das Goswami to strictly follow the rules and regulations of the renounced order. He didn't tell him to preach. Yet, all 6 Goswamis followed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's orders very strictly. And Prabhupada writes, when we receive an order from our spiritual master, we must strictly try to execute that order. That is the way of success. And when we do that, even if the spiritual master is not present before us, even then, he will bless us because we are trying to connect with his instructions. And when that happens, then what does the spiritual master do? Yasya deve para bhaktir, yatha deve tatha gurau, tasya te katita hi artaha, tasya prakachanti mahatmanaha. Very important verse to describe the spiritual master. It is nicely stated that when one has staunch faith in the spiritual master, in his words, not his form only, but his words. When we are so attached to the form of the spiritual master, sometimes we forget his words. We want to massage the lotus feet of the spiritual master, but we don't want to follow his instructions. Which one you think will please him more? He'll probably tell you, stop massaging my feet, but follow my instructions. This is common sense. Many of you are fathers and mothers. If your child came, pressed your feet, did everything nice, but never followed what you said, would you be happy? You won't. But if your child could not do those things very expertly, but he followed everything you said, because he has staunch faith in what you say, then won't you be pleased? You see? So actually, spiritual life is common sense. Common sense means it's common to all of us. Nothing uncommon about it. So this bhagavatam is really common sense actually. It is a relationship. And it's nicely stated, when one has staunch faith in the words of Guru and in the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the secret of success to all Vedic knowledge is revealed. Very nice point. Now someone may ask, how must we follow the instructions of Guru? What is the practical way to follow his instructions? I don't have to give you something from my unworthy realizations. It is better I just tell you what Prabhupada said very nicely. In the Science of Self-Realization, there's a very humorous point that Prabhupada makes. He gives a nice example of how we should follow the instructions of our spiritual master. He says, suppose I were to ask a disciple, my dear student, please give me a glass of water. It is then his duty to give me that glass of water. If he thinks, Prabhupada wants a glass of water, but why not give him something better? I'll get a glass of hot milk. Prabhupada says, that is not service. That is not service. In his consideration, meaning the disciple, hot milk is very palatable and maybe better than water. Yet, because I, meaning Srila Prabhupada, because I have asked for water, he has to give me water, not milk. That is favorable service by following the instructions of the spiritual master. And if you follow it in this mood that Srila Prabhupada gave, you will never feel separated from the spiritual master, even if he's here physically or if he's not. So this is a very important point we should remember actually. Now we are coming to the concluding part of our time together. And that is, what happens when, after assimilating all these important points about connecting to the spiritual master, what happens when the spiritual master actually departs from this world? How do we handle that situation? What should our mood be? All of us will normally be very, very tragically devastated. What does Prabhupada tell us about this? 428.47 is a good starting point. In 428.47, Srila Prabhupada says in his purport that when the spiritual master is alive, as long as he's physically present, the disciple should serve the body, the physical body of the spiritual master. Prabhupada writes that. So when the spiritual master is physically present, you please serve his body. That is known as Vapu Seva. You massage him, you serve him, but you also must follow his instructions. Then Prabhupada writes there that when the spiritual master is no longer physically present, this is an important point, when he is no longer physically present, then what must we do? Then the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Such a nice point. Huh? He doesn't say serve the spiritual master. He says serve his instructions. If you do that, Prabhupada says remarkably in the purport, I really like this line. He says, for one who does that, then the disciple and spiritual master are never separated. His divine grace tells us that. If you serve the instructions of your guru when he's no longer here, Prabhupada guarantees that you and your guru will never be separated. Why? Your spiritual master will always keep company with you. What a nice word, keep company. You know, when you think, hey, come, keep company with me, that means what? Walk with me, right? Talk with me, right? So Prabhupada says, if you follow the instructions of the spiritual master, even though his sharir is not here, he will still keep company with you, as long as you follow strictly the instructions that he has given. Very clear, following the instructions of the spiritual master. So now is the time for all of us whose spiritual masters have passed from this realm to that realm to understand one important point, that henceforth, all our love, all our devotion, all our faith, every energy we have is now directed at the service of the instructions of the spiritual master. That is very important. Second point, Prabhupada says, when the Acharya or the spiritual master comes, his duty is to spread Krishna consciousness. Now he speaks, Prabhupada is writing in the purport of 428.48. In that purport, Prabhupada says, the spiritual master comes and he will expand the Krishna consciousness movement. But unfortunately, when the spiritual master or the Acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees in the name of so-called Swamis, unauthorized principles, and philosophical speculations, they will all come. They will all come. It is a period of darkness. Why is this point very important? It is important because Prabhupada is not just speaking about rogues and non-devotees trying to take over something. He's also referring to us. If we don't follow the instructions of the spiritual master and he disappears, then even though we may look like devotees, we will also become rogues. We will also become non-devotees. We will become mental speculators. We will bring in unauthorized principles. We will alter the instructions of the spiritual master. And when that happens, our spiritual life is finished. And our connection with our spiritual master is gone. So Prabhupada says, you can expect that when the Acharya physically departs, things will become a bit of a state of what Prabhupada writes as disordered. But what must the disciples do then? Very important point. The perfect disciples of the Acharya, they try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. Very important. That's what they do. So please, in order for us not to become rogues and non-devotees, forget the outside world. that we should not become that. We should follow exactly what Prabhupada has stated in this super excellent purport. Super excellent. And now we come to the verse, to the purport of 428.50. In 428.50, Prabhupada says the extent to which a disciple honors the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada says, a devoted disciple of a spiritual master would rather die than to fail to execute the mission of his spiritual master. I'm not saying this so that everyone should now hang themselves or jump into some river. That's not the point. But the point is, Prabhupada writes, it is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master when the spiritual master departs. Each and every one of us has that duty. Whatever was the mission of the spiritual master, you must now take charge of it. Take charge doesn't mean you all fight with each other and say, I'm in charge. No. Take charge means take responsibility for that. Work together. Otherwise, Prabhupada says, better you light the fire and jump into the fire, because you're not fulfilling the true instructions of the spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Prabhupada quoted, says that the instructions of the Guru becomes the life and soul of the devotee. And that is why in the next verse, purport 51, Prabhupada concludes this whole discussion on living in separation with the spiritual master by saying something very nice. When you become serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, that determination of your seriousness is equal, tantamount to actually seeing Krishna directly. What an amazing statement. This means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instructions of the spiritual master. In the instructions of the spiritual master. So this is something we should remember very carefully and we should not forget. So as we round up our time together, we can understand that separation from the spiritual master is not an easy thing. Prabhupada writes very nicely, that when the spiritual master leaves this world, one has the right to cry and grieve. We have that right, Prabhus and Matajis. There's nothing wrong in crying. No one should say that if you are crying and grieving, and you show it externally, no one should minimize that grief. No. Gaur Govinda Maharaj said, in a lecture on the disappearance of Guru, Gaur Govinda Maharaj remarked that in this material world, we cry so much for our loved ones. Then how much more we must cry for that spiritual master who's bringing us back to Krishna. But we don't cry for him. And crying is not an external process. Not just an external process. Crying means that we are always feeling separation. And that separation enhances our feelings for the spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one day asked Ramananda Rai in Madhya Leela, 8th chapter. He asked him this question, Ramananda Rai, of all kinds of distress, which is the most painful? What a nice question, huh? Of all kinds of distress, which is most painful? And you know what Ramananda Rai said? Apart from separation from the devotee of Krishna, I know of no unbearable unhappiness in this world. In other words, my dear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is our separation from that devotee of Krishna that is the greatest source of pain and separation. It's a very, very important point. And that is what Prabhupada is reminding us. We should always remember that if someone becomes separated from a dear devotee of Krishna, we will experience acute pain. And no other kind of sorrow can be compared to it. It is known as Krishna Vihara Dukkha. It is known as the pain of separation from Krishna. That is what Uddhava felt when Krishna left. That is what Krishna felt when Arjuna felt when Krishna left. And this is what Mahaprabhu felt when Srila Haridas Thakur left. And I think before we end today's discussion, it's so apt to remember the passing of Haridas Thakur. And I can see Anand Prabhu's virtual background. And I can also see that beautiful advertisement, that you all designed, showing all the wonderful, inspiring devotion, spiritual masters of our movement, and showing the Lord with Haridas Thakur. Prabhupada tells us in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Haridas Thakur was a blessed personality. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu named him as Namacharya. Therefore, he is the spiritual master of all spiritual masters of the holy name. He is an Acharya. That is why when Mahaprabhu realized that Haridas Thakur was going to leave, the pain was unbearable for him. Chaitanya Charitamrita tells us that one day, Govinda, with some prasadam from Jagannath temple, went to see Haridas Thakur. And he saw Haridas Thakur lying on his bag and looking a bit ill, and he was chanting very slowly. So Govinda told Haridas Thakur, please eat the Mahaprasad. And at that point of time, Haridas Thakur said, I'm fasting today. I can't eat. Then Govinda said, this is Mahaprasad. You must eat. And then Govinda went to tell Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Haridas Thakur does not look well. And now this worried Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so he went very quickly in the evening to see Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur was lying down and looking very pale. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, Haridas, are you well? And then Haridas Thakur said, this body is all right, but my mind and my intelligence is not well. See how Haridas Thakur was speaking to that supreme spiritual master. Sometimes our spiritual masters would ask us, how are you feeling? And we'll say, very good. But see now how nicely it is that Haridas Thakur was saying. He was speaking the truth. He was saying, Mahaprabhu, my mind and intelligence is not well. And then Mahaprabhu said, what is the disease that is afflicting you? And of all people, the Namacharya, Haridas Thakur said, I have one disease. It is afflicting me. That disease is I cannot complete chanting the rounds. I cannot complete chanting the holy names of the Lord. If Namacharya says he cannot, he's worried about chanting holy names of the Lord and not finishing. I suggest you and I should be extremely worried about not completing our rounds. And that is his mood. That was his mood. And Mahaprabhu said, Haridas, you are the personification of chanting of holy name. You're very old now. It's all right. Don't be so strict with yourself. Reduce your rounds. And Haridas Thakur said, my Lord, I am the most condemned and the lowest of men. And I'm so untouchable and I have no service attitude to you. And despite all my disqualification, you have accepted me as a servant. I only have one wish. Please grant me that, my Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, beside himself, said, ask me and I will give it. So pleased he was with his disciple Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur said, I only desire one thing, that I not be present when your closing chapter of your pastimes is taking place. And before that time comes, my dear Lord, I pray that my body should fall down in your presence. And I wish to catch your lotus-like feet in my arms. And I wish to capture your lotus-like face in my heart. That is my prayer. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, it is not fitting that you should leave before I leave. And he left. The next day when they came, they saw that Haridas Thakur was looking very pale. Mahaprabhu and all his associates sat down. And at that point of time, Haridas Thakur got up. And the Lord gave him extreme mercy, as the spiritual master always gives us extreme mercy. He started loud kirtan. And he started describing the transcendental attributes of Haridas Thakur to everyone. You know, this is something that I recall His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj doing a lot. Whenever he came to Singapore, if someone introduced him, he would end up introducing that person and glorifying that person. I remember my Guru Maharaj during his Vyas Pujas. When we used to glorify Maharaj in Vyas Puja, we stood in front of him, spoke, and we left. Then he would take 10 minutes to give us our Vyasa Pujas. And he would glorify us more than we had glorified him. And we knew nothing else. We were left speechless. So this is the greatness and the gratitude we must have for our spiritual masters. They never saw anything bad in us. They always saw great things in us. And so Haridas Thakur was glorified by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then at the height of the kirtan, he set Mahaprabhu down and he sat down. His eyes were like two bumblebees Chaitanya Charitamrita says, and he fixed his eyes on the lotus face, the moonlight face of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He held the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his heart. He took the dust of the feet of all the devotees present and he put it on his head. And he began to chant and chant and chant the name of Krishna. Tears glided down and he drank in the sweetness of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as he chanted the holy names of the Lord, because that was the instruction of his spiritual master, to always chant. That was the specific instruction. As he chanted, just before he left this world, he gave up his body while performing one last following of instructions. Everyone was so amazed by the passing of Haridas Thakur, not death. Because Prabhupada writes, and he speaks in disappearance days of his Guru Maharaj. He says, appearance and disappearance are one and the same. The sun appears this side, therefore it has disappeared there. But when the sun appears there, it has disappeared here. But actually the sun hasn't appeared or disappeared. We are moving. So it appears like the sun has disappeared and the sun has appeared. It is based on what we are seeing. But the sun is always there. The sun is always in the sky. But depending on how our earth is moving, some days we see the sun and we think the sun is there. And then when the sun is gone, we think the sun has disappeared. Like that, the pure devotee of the Lord is always there. But we need spiritual vision to see them. And that spiritual vision can only come, Prabhus and Matajis, if we remember the great glories of Haridas Thakur, Sanatan Goswami, Rupa Goswami, all the Goswamis who surrendered their life and soul. If we remember how Arjuna took into heart all the instructions of Krishna. If we remember the humility of Maitreya, of how he said, only with honest endeavor I can do something, but I cannot do more. If only we can remember that when the spiritual master leaves, we can only connect with him on the point of Vani Seva. And Vani Seva means never ever change the instructions of the spiritual master and always be connected to him. I was reading the other day His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj's offering to Srila Prabhupada. And his offering to Srila Prabhupada was on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. And he said so nicely this point. He said that rather, Srila Prabhupada has just externally disappeared from our vision. We may not be able to see any more of Srila Prabhupada from our mundane vision, but he's very much there. So we may not be able to see His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, His Holiness Sripad Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, His Holiness Sridhar Swami, His Holiness Srila Mahavishnu Goswami. But the point is, he's always there to guide us. I'm using the same words. I'm reading from Bhakti Charu Maharaj's disappearance offering. Bhakti Charu Maharaj says, he, the spiritual master, will always be there to guide us, provided we remain fixed up at his lotus feet. He will reward us when we please him, and he will chastise us if we make mistakes. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj ended very nicely. We will face difficulties when we consider that Srila Prabhupada has left the world. You see the point? When we have lost faith that Srila Prabhupada is not present, when we lose faith that our spiritual master is not present, that's the time we will face difficulties. But when we know that the spiritual master is in our heart, he's outside in his instructions, and he's surrounding us with all his glorious mercy, then we will never feel separation from him. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai Chaitanya Charitamrita. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srila Gurudev ki. Nitai Gaura Premanande. I'm sorry I took a bit longer, but it was a very important topic, and I thought to do justice to it would require some time. Anand Prabhu, Viraj Prabhu, thank you very much for having me on this call, as always. And my gratitude to all the devotees who are on this call also.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think
What should I do now?
some question on the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Balram Prabhu was sharing very nicely on Bhakti Charu Maharaj said in the memories of Srila Prabhupada lecture. When yogis realize they see Paramatma in their heart, when devotees realize they see spiritual master in their heart and not Krishna. So nice. Regarding the definition of Guru, I think that verse is actually in 4:21:28. Manohar Prabhu is 4:21:28. I'll just end by saying one thing because there's no other questions. When my spiritual master Maharaj had a stroke in London, we thought that the end was coming. It was in 2000, I think. And I remember Maharaj was sorting out matters in case the stroke became very bad. I was quite devastated because it never struck me that it could happen. So then I asked Maharaj, what happens if you leave? You know, every day I'm talking to you, calling you. How will I know what to do? And Maharaj said that everything that needs to be given is already in my instructions. Everything. And everything that needs to be given is given by the spiritual master. Maharaj told me there's never an accidental time when the spiritual master departs from the world. I really like that point. It is never accident when he departs. He always departs by arrangement. Always, always, always. So Maharaj then told me that if you follow the instructions I've given you very carefully, then you will realize one thing. This sharir, which is now a barrier because we have to pick up phone, we have to send fax and this and that, emails. Without the sharir, there is what we call the spiritual exchange. It will be faster, we will communicate better, it will be deeper. Just follow the instructions. So this is a nice point actually. I have one question here. Why doesn't Krishna immediately punish someone and why one has to carry their karma from one life to next? I could not think of any reply instantly. Kindly enlighten us. Well, it's up to Krishna when he wants to punish someone. That's what makes him the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if he doesn't want to immediately punish you, then please be rest assured that he will know when to punish you. We should accept that. That is the meaning of having faith in Krishna. There's another question here. How should a devotee serve Guru physically when there is a difference in gender? When there's a difference in gender, for example, a female disciple, many female disciples do wonderful services for their Guru. Some of them may help with secretarial services like taking care of emails. Some of them have been asked by spiritual masters to write, depending on their capacity. Many of them also cook for the pleasure of their spiritual master and the Lord. And very often spiritual masters engage, like my Guru Maharaj engaged so many of his female disciples in preaching. He told them, you should all preach, get the Matajis together and preach to the children. He taught them how to run families according to Krishna consciousness. He taught them the values of being mothers, wives, of being daughters, just like he taught us the values of being sons and husbands and fathers. So even when the Guru is here physically, there's so many ways to serve him. But the denominator of all this service is always the service of his instructions. That's it. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Anand Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Viraj Prabhu, and Hare Krishna to Vaman Kshetra and all devotees.
Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam Prabhu, I have one question, Prabhu.
Yes, Balram Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhu, sorry to take
No,
time.
no, it's fine.
I know it is this instructions of spiritual master that we should live with, but for the devotees, at least in my case, that I don't have very much association of Guru Maharaj. Very few moments, not like so much. Especially there is not very close association of Guru Maharaj. And how can we remember very deeply? Because sometimes it's very difficult when you have very close association, Vapu, with Guru Maharaj, then it is easy to remember Guru Maharaj, with his instructions, or at least, with his smile and with his laughing and with his chastising. But I feel, it's very difficult to get that deeper connection when Guru Maharaj, that WAPA association is not there. But how can we develop that, deep connection with Maharaj? So
Very nice question, Prabhu. There are two ways to do it. And both ways are actually given by our Guru Maharaj, because this question was given to him. The first is that you take association of the disciples of Guru Maharaj who have spent time with him and hear from them his pastimes, what he did, how he walked, what he spoke, his mannerisms, what he liked, what he didn't like. Because they are all God brothers and sisters, and they are your family, and they will share it with you. So that was one thing Maharaj told me, share it and hear. So share and hear. If you have some things that you can share, share it. And then hear from everyone. That will increase your affection in separation for him. It may be painful, Prabhu, but it will cause you to remember him more. And by remembering him more, that pain of separation becomes beneficial to our spiritual life. That's one way. The other way is to remember and take heart. Srila Prabhupada, first of all, met his spiritual master for very short moments of his life. Very short moments of his life. He was not serving his spiritual master like a personal servant. He was not within that inner circle of personal secretaries of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In fact, you can count the number of times he met his spiritual master. But because he took the instruction of his spiritual master to heart, and he had staunch faith, the two words he uses in his purports, he had staunch faith that by following that instructions, I will always be connected to him. Therefore, that faith empowered him to always feel deeply connected to his spiritual master. And that is true of many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples too. I have known so many exalted Srila Prabhupada's disciples who actually first were initiated by mail. They never met Srila Prabhupada. Some of them never met him at all, but were distributing books and inspired by him through other disciples, and then heard of his passing when they were in some part of the world and they felt devastated, continued their connection with Srila Prabhupada based on his books and his instructions and association. And today they are blissful. And you would think that they have been spending so much physical time with Srila Prabhupada, but actually on paper, no. So actually, when we become absorbed in following even one instruction, the spiritual master will give you the richness and depth of your relationship with him, Prabhu. I hope that's useful, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
So much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I came to realize today in class that, like we understand that Krishna and his name are non-different, and we, in due course of time, we have realized it a bit that Krishna and his names are non-different. And today in the class, somewhat you made us realize that spiritual master and his instructions are actually non-different, and we should be actually serving his instruction. It's like serving spiritual masters. So this is a very important point you have told us. How we can keep this point in our heart for a long time, so that we don't come down from this remembrance. So it's really good to hear this today, and a more elaborate elaboration from you would really help.
Thank you. It's a nice point you raised, Prabhu. The one thing I can share with you is that in order for us to solidify this mood of understanding that the spiritual master and his instructions are non-different, and that is actually the platform of service and loving him, is actually to act on those instructions, to draw a plan, to work on that instructions, to meditate on the instructions, and then to discuss the instructions and to implement the instructions. But we can't do it alone, Prabhu. We do it in sadhu sangha, and it becomes very much easier. And that's why spiritual master is so kind. He has many disciples, and disciples help each other. So if you remember an instruction and you're inspired by it and you share it with me, then we should discuss how you want to implement the instruction. And then we should discuss how the instructions are being implemented and how is it working and how are you expanding the instructions. And in that way, you find there's so much enthusiasm because you have something to look forward to in spiritual life. Otherwise, many times our experiences when spiritual masters depart, disciples wake up the next morning and think, what is there in life now? What is there for us to look forward to? The Shastras tell us we have a whole life ahead to continue to be associated with our spiritual master on the basis of Vani. And once this sharir is finished, then we pray that wherever our spiritual master is, whatever new project he has started, in whichever part of the universe, we pray to go there and join him again. Is that helpful, Sadashiv Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dev Prabhu.
Yes, Sudama Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Couple of questions more from my wife. I just wanted to ask, because she asked me, I was not able to answer. So first thing is, whenever it is said that whenever any disciple commits any mistake or any this thing, the guru takes bears the brunt of it. So after the guru leaves the material planet, is that still true? Number one. And second question is, whatever a human being on the material planet performs, it is under the three modes of material nature.
Prabhu, I think I went with following, so I'll answer the first question first.
Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship is eternal. Therefore, the debt that you owe to your spiritual master is eternal. The promise that he made to you is eternal. So if we don't live up to our part of it, then whatever that the guru has to live up on his part of it, he will continue to do so. That's a straightforward answer.
Right. Okay, thank you. And the second part is, whatever a human being on the material planet, whatever we do, it is bound by it is basically enforced by the three modes of material nature.
Yes.
Then how is it that the human being incurs the sin? Shouldn't it be like it's the material mode that is forcing a human being to do whatever he is doing? Then why does he incur the sin in that case?
The material modes of nature are compelling, but we have what we call a minute independence. If we don't exercise a minute independence towards Krishna, we become implicated in this material cycle of birth and death. So that is the reason why we are implicated. And because when we use the minute independence to move towards sense gratification, vikarma, then even though the material modes of nature are very powerful, and even though we can say, hey, they should share some blame for us, the truth of the matter is we decided to move away from Krishna. And therefore, this entire paraphernalia and arrangement is a result of our own desires. So actually, the person responsible for all this in one way is actually this spoiled child who's been asking for a sweet he shouldn't be taking, and he's insisting and insisting and insisting, and the sweet comes, which is super sweet, he eats it, and then he blames the sweet. How much can we blame the sweet? In the end, we wanted it. So I hope that's useful, Prabhu.
Yes.
Shastri point in point for that is 554, Srimad Bhagavatam. Mataji
Sure.
reads it. The answer is given very nicely also.
554. Okay.
Yes, 554.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Nice questions.
Prabhuji, I had one small question about this. My name is Vikas from Abu Dhabi.
Yes, Vikas, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, whenever we speak about spiritual master and when we see around, we see that spiritual master is more often male. So is there any restriction that a female cannot be a spiritual master? Because we see very few.
Yeah, good point. There are practical challenges sometimes in terms of society. But one important point you've raised, which I like the fact that you brought it up, is that the instructing spiritual master, the one who gives instructions to you, Prabhu, to guide you along the way, that is known in Shastra as Siksha Guru. Siksha Guru, there is no restriction to a Siksha Guru in the sense that anyone who's qualified can actually become a spiritual master. In fact, Mahaprabhu says very clearly, there is no disqualification to any living entity becoming a spiritual master as long as, one, Krishna allows them to be, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and two, that they are devotees who are inspiring other devotees. So on a very high, broad level, devotional service, just like devotional service has no disqualifications, to become a spiritual master and preach Krishna consciousness, teach people, instruct people, inspire people, there is also no restrictions. So many of the Matajis who are on this call They are all running programs, they are preaching, they are actually inspiring many devotees, and therefore they are also spiritual masters. If today, Vikash Prabhu, you read something from Bhagavad Gita, and then you decided that you wanted to share it with somebody else, and you share it with that person and shared your realizations on it, you have just guided that person. And in Sastra, you have become Siksha Guru to that person. So, no distinctions in that sense, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice. Okay, I'll take one last question. I see a Surangi Radhika Mataji here. You're mentioning that questions to Gurudev are very important to establish a deeper connection. How should I understand this if I've not asked a question to Guru Maharaj? Nice point. Actually, when we talk about inquiries to the spiritual master, the inquiries very often relate to the challenges that we may face in trying to follow his instructions. So very often, if you have an instruction given by Srila Gurudev, if you have any questions of how to follow it, those questions will actually increase your connection with the spiritual master. But if you are perfectly following the instructions, your connection is already deepened. But I guess why Krishna has written there that we should sincerely inquire is because we are all fallible beings. So actually, we will always make some mistakes in the way we are trying to follow spiritual master. So better to ask and be corrected than not to ask. That's the reason. Hope it's useful, Mataji. I have another class coming up soon. So with your permission, I will have to leave then.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Devakinandan Das Prabhuji, for such a wonderful class. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Next Friday, we have Gopal Krishna Das Prabhuji joining us from New Zealand. So he's speaking on power of repentance. So that class will be on 7 p.m. Sydney time. So you can join. And today's class recording, you can listen on Vaman Chetra Facebook, WhatsApp, and also on His Grace Devakinandan Das Prabhuji's website. So thank you very much once again for joining us. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Devakinandan Das Prabhuji ki jai.
Ananta Kodi Vaishnavinda ki
jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.